Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Paul Heut, who's the executive chair and CEO of Americas Gold and Silver, a growing precious metals mining company with multiple assets in North America, including the Galena Complex in Idaho, the US, and also their Cosala operation in Mexico. With a mine engineering background, Paul has a strong command of capital markets and has also served at all levels of engineering and mine operations. So he's well versed to build and develop a mining company. As the CEO, he's leading the company's strategic vision to establish it as a premier North American focused silver and gold producer. And he's on the podcast today to speak about the business, his experience in turning around operations, the importance of mentorship, and how to build a culture of safety and efficiency, and ways to acknowledge and reward employees, plus a lot more. Paul, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thanks, Rob. I'm doing great today. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and I appreciate your time taking your time up to come on the podcast. As we always start these podcasts off, I just wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about your career, how you got into the mining industry, how your career's developed to current day. Obviously, I mentioned that you've got experience in the capital markets, but also obviously you've worked in operations as well. So I'll hand it over to you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, my career started off in mining in 1987, so about 37 years ago. So I come from a small mining town in northern Ontario called Timmins. So unfortunately, I was a real bad hockey player, Rob. So at 18 years old, instead of going to play hockey like every other 18-year-old boy wanted to do, I find myself graduating high school. 3 days later, I was actually a janitor in a small underground mine. So it's been a very interesting 37 years. As I said, I was right out of high school, right into the mine. So started off at an entry-level position. My father and grandfather and all uncles were into mining, so I had an easy step to coming into mining, but then it was about proving myself and what could I do over the next several years. So for me, my career accelerated quite differently than most CEOs. I started in that entry level, but then quickly wanted to drill and blast. So as I was working at that entry level, I became a nipper, and it was a very unique, smaller mine. I went and approached the best miners in the mine, and I still do this thing where I approach the best miners at every mine I go into, whether I'm in Australia, Mexico, South Africa, Canada, the US. So when I was 18 or 19 years old, I went to the best miners in the mine. It was very obvious, the guys that were drilling and blasting, making the most money. And I asked them guys if they would teach me how to drill. And they said, well, Paul, we'll teach you how to drill, but you can't take any of our bonus. So I said, oh, well, that's great. So then I went to the man running the mine, and I said to him, will you allow me to work on afternoon shift and let these two guys, it was Matt and Hector, let them train me? And he said, well, I'll let them do it, but you get no pay. And I thought, oh man, okay, no pay, no bonus. But I said, forget it. I really want to learn how to drill. I said, I knew I could do it. So at 19 years old, I was working day shift as a nipper underground. And then when these guys would rotate in on afternoon shift, I would work an extra 8 hours. So I worked about 160 hours for free in a mine in Timmins, just learning, Rob, how to run one of these things, a jackleg. Now, most people will not go do that for free. Running a jackleg is a lot of work. It's very labor intensive. But I quickly, at 20 years old, I found myself being quite a good driller. I became a spare driller. By the time I was 21 years old, I was a leader on a different type of mining, which is called raise mining. So most of the mines that people see, they see a mine and they see a shaft going down and they see a decline. So all the levels we have between those in an underground working mine, Rob, they're connected with tunnels that go up vertically. And those are called raises. And raises are probably one of the most dangerous things you're going to see in any mine in the world. Because you're drilling and blasting day in, day out underneath an unsupported face. You go up, you drill 30 holes, you blast it with dynamite, you climb back up on a ladder, you drill and blast. So you're continually excavating upwards. So at 21 years old, I was actually the youngest leader in all of Canada for a company called Redpath. So I was working up in Yellowknife. We were driving raises. So I had worked very hard all those 3 hours to learn how to drill. And I was committed to being a really good miner. So I became a raise miner, which is a specialty item. And I was good at open raise, Alimak raise, and any other type of raises, which allowed me to really understand narrow vein mining, and which opened up the door for me to work at a number of operations. While I worked for the same company, it was a contractor, Rob. So in 1 year, I could work in 5 different mines, but the same company. So I would be transferred to mine after mine after mine. So learning all this information over several years, at different operations. I think I worked at 40 mines by the time I was 30 years old. And it was always the same company, but at different operations. And that type of exposure really taught me a lot on who's doing things right in which province, which country, who's doing things the safest, which guys are motivating the men the best. So I got tapped on the shoulder at about 27 years old while working for Kinross when they had just formed. October of 1994, Kinross Gold got formed. 3 years later, Kinross had approached me and selected me to become a next generation miner. So at 29 years old, I'd been mining already almost 11 years, drilling and blasting day in, day out. I find myself in a unique opportunity in my career where the company I'm working for says, why don't you go get an engineering degree? And I thought, well, geez, I'm 29. I wasn't married at the time. I didn't have any kids at the time, but I did have a house and I did have a truck payment. So like any other 29-year-old male, I thought, man, you know what? I can't go to school. I can't afford it. I'm going to have to give up this really nice truck of mine. And I worked really hard. But the company said, listen, you're not listening to us. We're going to pay you to go to school. And I thought, what? Oh, my Lord. So that it changed my career forever, Rob. I was given an opportunity, me and 2 other men in the company. So there was 3 men inside of the whole company that were offered to go to school while being paid for 3 years. And during that, it was a 3.5-year program at a very prestige mining school in Canada called Haileybury School of Mines. It's a 100-year mining school, one of the greatest mining schools in Canada, at least. And I worked, because I was a miner drilling and blasting, I knew that I didn't want to do that every day. I knew I wanted to become a supervisor, a superintendent, maybe a GM one day. And I'd always wanted to do something in management. Going to college after mining for 11 years and then graduating college with a mining degree, it really opened up an opportunity that I could never have had. And I owe it to that company and somebody who saw something in me back then. And from that point, upon graduating, and I'll say there was 92 students in our first year. There's only 16 of us that graduated. And I did graduate with the Dean's Medal. So I was working very hard. I thought, man, if I don't do really good in school, I'm going to be back on a jackleg. So I said, I got to work really hard for the 4 years. As I was going through school, Kinross put me through the mill. They put me through engineering. They put me through geology. They put me in the surveying company. They put me in every department. So it allowed me to grow and groom me for a VP role. That's what they were doing at the time. And it was a lot of foresight in them to say, look, we need to groom our own people and develop within the company. And I'll tell you today, and I think this is one of the questions later, but I'm going to talk about it now. One of the issues we're going to have in our industry in the future is the talent pool. There's not enough people coming into mining anymore, and we need mining at all scales here. So I'll leave that. I'll park that for the time being. Rob, I'll finish off my personal career and path and how it's very different than most other CEOs. So I graduate Haileybury School of Mines in 2000. And then I'm giving an opportunity to come to the U.S. at a brand new mine. They hadn't taken out any stopes, and it was called the Midas Mine. So this mine forever changed my life, my career as well. I come in here from Canada to the U.S. as a narrow vein expert because everything here at Midas was 1.2 to 1.5 meters wide. And then we start adopting a mining method that is very commonly used in Canada, which is long hole. It's safer, it's more productive, and it's the lowest cost. So we were mining into this deposit in Nevada that had never taken out a stope. Not one stope had been removed. I was there with the first one. In fact, my father drilled the first stope off. He was still drilling at that point in his career. So it was very interesting that I come in, I was the mine superintendent, my dad is drilling it, we blast the stope. But for the next several years, I find myself at Midas I was superintendent, I got promoted to chief engineer, then I got promoted to general manager. And this was for Newmont. I was the youngest general manager of all of Nevada. We had 10 operating mines, Newmont. So Newmont's a very large company. And I was quite excited to get promoted as GM at about, I think I was 37 years old, but I had a lot of experience behind me by that time. And remember, having worked at those 40 mines, that really allowed me to be different than most other candidates. So I could use those experiences that I saw at other mines, or the network, which is so powerful. You could pick up the phone and go, I worked with a guy in a mine in Alaska, and they were doing this exact same thing. Or I worked at a mine in Alberta or Ontario or Canada, or no matter where it was. That network was quite powerful. That Rolodex that I built up over the years allowed me to pick up the phone, call somebody that if I didn't know it, I had access to somebody who did know it. And that helped in every situation. And all the companies that I built, that Rolodex continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's how you build strong teams. So I'm 37 years old. I'm GM at Midas, and a South African company comes into Nevada and they talk about wanting to buy Midas. So they have the neighboring mine. The CEO approaches me and he says, Mr. Heut, I know you're running a mine for Newmont, but we run the mine next door. It's a brand new mine. We're going to build it. We'd like to know if you would come and build it as our general manager. And what we're going to do is we're going to buy the mine you're working at. We're going to go to Newmont and buy this mine. So I thought, would I leave Newmont at this age? I'm doing very well in Newmont. I was being slated to go to the flagship operations, which was Leeville, but I took the risk. And that's another thing I'd encourage people along the way, that if you feel like, there's time for a change, then take that risk. And I took that risk and became general manager of the neighboring mine. Unfortunately, that company, and I won't name the company, it didn't succeed in its plan to buy Midas. But what happened next is it allowed me to be the GM of the neighboring mine, which is the Hollister mine. That company that I was working for, unfortunately, went bankrupt, but then I became CEO of Klondex. And this is where my life changes once again. Klondex, we start off with a single asset called Fire Creek. And then we buy Midas. So I go to Newmont. I'd worked there for 7 years. Now think about this, Rob. I pick up the phone and I call Newmont and I say, would you guys sell me Midas mine? And they're saying, is this the Paul Heut who used to work for us, who ran the mine? And I said, it is. And they said, well, Paul, it's going to cost a lot of money to buy Midas. And I said, well, how much? And they threw out a number, 80 to 85 million. And I said, okay, I'll get the money. And they said, well, how much money do you have now? And I said, I got about $1.8 million. And they thought, oh my God, this guy's nuts. There's no way he's doing this, right? There's no way a guy who worked for us for all those years, he's a good operator. In fact, I was recognized in Newmont for a lot of awards. Strong operator, but now he's dumping into an area, into the capital markets that he's not experienced. And they weren't wrong to an extent. So what I did there was I did like any other person, and I picked up that Rolodex and I called people. And I called Pierre Lassonde and David Harquell, who are very prominent people. Both of them were in Newmont. And I said to them, look, I'd really like to buy Midas. I have Fire Creek. Would you guys help me buy Midas? And it was very interesting because I was in an office in Toronto with both of them. They picked up the phone with me, called Newmont on my behalf and said, look, Paul used to work for us, both David and Pierre Lassonde, when Midas was running. He was our GM. We think he should own it. In fact, we're going to support him. And Franco-Nevada at the time, David was chairman, and I think, Pierre Lassonde was chairman, David was CEO. They said, we're going to write him the first check for $36 million. And they did that. So they supported me. And then I ended up buying Midas. So I had spent 7 years at this mine, superintendent, chief engineer, general manager. I leave for 5 years to run the neighboring mine, Rob, for 5 years as general manager, hoping to buy it. Never happens. But then I form another company and become CEO of this company. And my first step is to buy Midas, something I'd never done in my life. I'm sitting there as an operator, a miner, and I buy Midas. And Midas has a lot of, it's the first time I left Canada to come work in the US. I met my lovely bride there. We've been married over 20 years. We have 7 kids. So this mine has a lot of special places for me. I have a lot of good memories. There are a lot of good people. We buy Midas. And then a year later, the mine next door, Hollister, comes up for sale. And I buy that one. So I had worked at Midas for 7 years. I buy it from Newmont. I worked at Hollister for 5 years. I buy it from Waterton. Now we have 3 mines in Nevada with one centralized mill. And people are going, how did this guy who was a laborer, a raised miner, went to school later in his life, how did he do this? How did he pull it off? And it's all about the network and the people that I had associated with, that I'd met along the way, and my lack of giving up. Look, I surround myself with people who don't know how to fail. If you look at the success stories we've had over the last 15 years, every person around my team are very like-minded to me in the sense that we don't give up, we don't fail, we don't accept defeat, and we press forward. We just, mining is tough, Rob. Mining has been around for a long time. It's going to be around for a lot longer. We need the metals in the world. But if you have any type of leniency or you give up too easy, you'll struggle in mining, because this is an industry that's a tough business. And unless you're willing to really dive into it with both hands and feet, you probably won't make it. So that attitude is around not just me as the CEO and chairman, around my whole team. So that's a really good understanding of where I go from the beginning as a high school graduate through to college, Haileybury School of Mines. And then as I become CEO of Klondex, at that time in my life, I'm actually attending Stanford University for growing to be a better executive, a better CEO. So I'm attending Stanford University for their mini MBA. So I'm an alumni of Stanford. It really helped polish me up in the business sector, understanding capital markets and a balance sheet and understanding that part of the business, which is extremely important. So the mining part, you have to understand every part of the business here in order to be successful. So Klondex so we sell Klondex in 2018 for $760 million. We started it at about a $40 million company. So this thing explodes, and gold is trading at $9.50 an ounce here, Rob. This is a really tough time in gold, but for 5 years, we're running 3 of the highest gold grade mines in the world, on the whole planet. And we're running about 1 ounce per ton. So if you want it in grams, you're 31 gram. That's our head grade going into the mill. That's fully diluted to the plant. People are going, how the heck are they doing this? They got 3 little mines, 1 mill. We're running at about 250 tons a day, almost 200,000 ounces of gold per year, and making money in a much, much lower gold price. So we're fortunate enough to sell Klondex in 2018, and we have a large following from that sale. And then Eric Sprott taps me on the shoulder and says, Mr. Heut, I was a big shareholder in Corora, or Klondex. I have this mine in Australia, he says. We just had this massive coarse gold discovery. It's called the Father's Day vein. In fact, if you look right now, Rob, go to the Perth Mint and you look up the largest specimen discovered in the world to date is still from Beta Hunt. It's called the King Henry, and we helped pull that thing out. So if you go to the Perth Mint, you actually get to see it. If you go on a website right now, you can see it in pictures, but it's an amazing specimen that I helped bring into the Perth Mint. But Eric Sprott had this nickel company, it was called Royal Nickel. And he said, Paul, everybody on the board is nickel people. And we just had this massive coarse gold, and it's all got to be narrow vein. Why don't you jump on the board and help me out? So this happens very quickly from this point, Rob. We sell Klondex in July, August, or September. I come on the board. 1 month later, I become chairman of the board. 1 month later, I become interim CEO, and I stay interim CEO for the next 6 years. And we repeat the same model we did at Klondex, step by step, and get the same shareholders. And returns were very similar because not only did we deliver operationally, but we had the wind behind our sail of gold prices. So gold doubles in the next 6 years. And here we are taking a $58 million company. We sell it 6 years later for $1.3 billion. We merge it into Westgold, which was almost one of those fairy tale stories where Beta Hunt is an amazing. I always called it the beast, and it's still a beast. They just put out a resource, an MRE on it here 2 weeks ago, and I'm very happy for all the shareholders of Westgold and for the CEO Wayne. That thing continues to keep giving. It's a beautiful mine. It will go on for many, many more years. But on the sale of Corora, Eric Sprott is a very large owner of America's Gold and Silver, where I am today. Eric actually owns 40% of one of the mines. And he says, again, Paul, why don't you, now that you sold Corora, why don't you come help me in this thing? And I said, well, I'll help you, but this time things got to be a little different. I said, you got to give up your 40%. And a year before we sold Corora, Rob, Eric had asked me to be his technical advisor on this file. It's the Galena mine. He owns 40% of it, and he's supposed to be collecting dividends. You got a Canadian billionaire expecting to collect money month after month. Instead, he's writing a check for $500,000 to $700,000 every month. He's redeploying cash month after month after month after an initial investment of $20 to $25 million. So he's getting frustrated. So I join as his technical advisor. I'm still the CEO of Corora, and I'm starting to look into things while I'm helping him. And I say, look, I'll come on board, but I'll bring my team, and we've got to motivate them as well to stay together, because everybody had opportunities. When we sold Corora, every executive who worked for me had offers from all different types of companies. So everyone could have went their own separate ways. We decided to stay together again for the third time and build this thing together. But we had to convince Eric to vend in his 40%. And while I was his technical advisor, Rob, there were 3 other companies that approached him to buy his 40%. And he said no to all of them. He's a very big believer in silver. And I said, Eric, if you want me and the team to come, you have to say yes. You can't say no like you said to all those other 3. We have to do this together, but you got to put in, the shareholders of America's Gold and Silver must own 100% of America's Gold and Silver. So are you willing to do that? And he said, I'll do it as long as you and the team come in. And then, we raised the first $50 million. Most recently, we just raised $111 million, $100 in debt. So we did not dilute our shareholders, and then an $11 million at a pretty, very big premium of equity. So that's a pretty long, probably the longest explanation I've ever had in a very long time about my career, from starting off as a janitor, sharpening bits, going underground as a nipper, learning how to run a jackleg for free for years. I don't think I've ever been recorded saying it, but that's exactly what happened. And I know the miners who were there, though, they even still talk about it in Timmins. Being a raised miner for 10 years, going to college at 30 years old, and creating an opportunity in the U.S. that I never, ever looked back. And again, married my beautiful wife. And now I'm 4th-time CEO and very proud of it, and very, very much aligned with all our shareholders. So maybe I'll take a moment here and let you say something.
Yeah, no, and that's a really interesting, obviously, background and career. And I don't think I've had anyone on the podcast have had such a varied career. And as you mentioned, you started off as a janitor. Now, I suppose following on from that do you think that by doing the career path that you actually have gone through, as opposed to maybe studying, as most people studying a mine engineering degree, for instance, first of all, do you think you've benefited more by taking the career path that you have done, as opposed to others that may have left school, gone to university to do a mine engineer, then got that training? Do you think you're better off doing the way that you have done it? And it maybe it's not all right it's probably not the best situation for everyone, but for yourself, do you believe the way that you've just experienced your career, do you think that was the best way for you? And would you have got further, or have you gone further than by doing what you've done rather than going straight into education and then go into site?
Yeah, look, you pointed out something that's very important, Rob. Each person is different. But for me personally, there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever that going through each level, being a nipper, being a miner, and I was a remote mucker, I was a truck driver. Every level, I went through every layer before becoming a shift boss, before going to college. Those learning experiences and working at all those different mines, mind you, same company, but different mines. I could never have learned that in school. I couldn't have learned it in a classroom. I went to school with 92 students, started. Some of them do phenomenal graduating, phenomenal. But others, they don't have any practical experience. You can see the ones that graduate. And even today, I see engineers that graduate. Those of them who've been in co-ops, who've had a couple, 4 months here, 4 months there, underground, or in a mining capacity, they always tend to do better. So from my perspective and my own life, there's no doubt, had I gone to college right away, I probably, I wouldn't have been near as motivated. When I went at the time in my life, I'd had so many years running jacklegs with my hands, and I know the pain you get from running a handheld drill for 5 hours a day for 10 years. I know how much hard work it is. And I knew that when I went to school, I was very committed. So if you just think about my experience in school, there was 92 students, 16 graduated. Now, the 16 that graduated were pretty much all mature students. The younger ones, they just found different paths. They just said, well, look, mining, there was quite a few of us that were mature students. And all of us that were mature students, we certainly did not want to give up because we knew what was waiting for us at the mine. We said, look, you're going to go run a jackleg for the next 10 years. I said, my dad is 65. He died at 74, still running a drill. I said, that's not what's in store for my life. So, again, having the opportunities that I've had in my career and the path that God put out for me was by far the best path. And I'd say if I've seen miners in my career that I believe are next generation miners, and I believe in this pay it forward, this scenario where what happened to me, where somebody tapped me on the shoulder and changed my life forever by saying, look, we're gonna let you go to school, but we're gonna pay you to go to school so you don't have that burden or stress, so you could really study. I have done that about 4 times. I will continue to do it in my career because there's a lot of really good mining people that could benefit from going to college or university. And the industry as a whole benefits because people who have that different background understand the safety of it. They understand that driving a tunnel, when you excavate a tunnel, on paper, you can see that on paper you can draw something like this in a mine where you're going, all right, I'm driving down here and then the tunnel's going to go that way. And you say, well, show me how that's going to work in a mine where that's a wall, that's a wall. You can't do those things. And people go, I don't understand. And you've got to say, well, look, in a mine, you have to have that. You have to be able to turn the equipment. Small things like that, unless you've lived it and breathed it or drilled it in a mine, you don't understand it. And a lot of my junior engineers, I love to help them. I've got some great junior engineers, and I walk up to them and I say, let me see the last design you did. And if they don't have a 60-degree slope, or say, how are they going to drill that in the mine? And how are you going to muck it? How are you going to get down with a piece of equipment and remove the rock? And they go, we never thought of that. And I said, that's what you don't get in the context of a classroom, but you will get if you've actually done that. If you were underground, like I was remote mucking or driving a truck, you understand that driving a truck in a spiral like this all day long, it's not like in Indianapolis here. You're going up and down in smoke. You have to design the mine in a fashion where people can operate within that mine. So a long way to say to your question, do I believe the path that was laid out for me was the greatest outcome? There's no doubt. I don't know of too many people who were raised miners or even starting off as a nipper or janitor that have been able to become CEOs. There are some, there's no doubt about it. But I'm one of the few blessed ones, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, no, good. I wonder if you can give us an overview and snapshot of America's Gold and Silver.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Rob. America's Gold and Silver is a complete new turnaround story. So if you look back, not that far, even 9 months ago, America's Gold and Silver was struggling on its back, almost bankrupt. But we've come in a whole new team. We've strengthened the entire board right out of the gate. We've strengthened the board. We've put a new executive team and we've put a new operations team. America's Gold and Silver is a silver company predominantly. We have the mine in Idaho, the Galena mine, and then we got Cosala in Mexico. And I'll talk quickly about what broke our pick. We had a gold mine in Nevada, Rob, and it's called the Relief Canyon mine. This mine was built, the company raised raised a little over $100 million to permit, commission, and build a new mine in Nevada. And Nevada is one of the greatest jurisdictions you're going to find on the planet. The mine started up, and as soon as it started up, the entire system plugged up. It was preg robbing, and the gold couldn't get extracted. So that really sent the company on a downward spiral. It could never recover from that. It becomes septic. The company became septic. Nobody wanted to be around it. The shareholders ran from it. The balance sheet was stretched. And once there was no production from it, there was debt associated with it. So somebody had to come in and fix this thing. And this is where we came along. And now we're not focused on the Relief Canyon mine. We're very, very focused on our coastal operation in Mexico, which is a great mine. We've got a very, very strong team in Mexico. And then our mine operation in Idaho, which is the Galena mine. And I'll just touch briefly on the Galena mine. The Galena mine has been producing about 1.1 to 1.3 million ounces of silver per annum for the last 10 years, roughly about that. You might go 1 year a little higher or lower, but roughly around that average, Rob. In 2002, our mine is a narrow vein mine. A narrow vein underground mine produced 5.6 million ounces of silver. So when you start looking at these numbers and you start thinking, all right, in 20 years ago, this mine produced 5.6 million ounces. What happened since then to it averaging a little over 1 million ounces? And what is going on? Because if you come to the mine, you see that there are 4 shafts in a row, four sunk shafts within about a 4-kilometer radius. There's 2 mills on surface, 2 mills, and only one of them being used. And then there's about 60 miles of tunnels. So there's a lot of money being spent, a lot of capital invested. A new shaft today alone, one new shaft could be anywhere from $400 to $700 million. I have 4 of them. I'm using one of them. A new mill is $100 million every day of the week, maybe even more, 200 million. I have 2 of them. I'm using one of them 3 days a week. So you start to think about what are the opportunities in front of them? What happened here? Well, you know that all the money was deployed to Relief Canyon. So no money came to Galena or Mexico. So given the money that we raised, that first $50 million, we steadied the ship and steadied the balance sheet. This next $100 million that we raised was specifically to get us back onto that path of getting to 5 million ounces. And look, Rob, we will get there. This is not about us creating a rocket and building something that's going to the moon. We're not doing anything. If anything, the fact that it was done before gives me tremendous comfort, because anything someone else has been able to do in a mine, we've been able to do or do better. It's that simple. I'll give you a quick example because I think listeners need to understand this and where some of the confidence from our shareholders comes from. Our shareholders believe in what we're doing and what we're about to do because we've done it before. We have a very strong, proven track record. I'll give you one metric. So when we got to Corora, the Beta Hunt mine in 6 years ago, so 2018, right around then, 2019, the mine struggled at the time, Rob, to deliver 20 to 23,000 tons of ore a month. So we could not do 1,000 ore tons per day. We couldn't get to 30. On about my 3rd month of being CEO there, we actually had a big celebration at the mine site where we actually produced 30,000 tons of ore. And I stood up in front of everyone at the mine and I said, look, this has never been done at this mine. It's the first time in the history of Beta Hunt that the mine does 30,000 tons. I said, I couldn't be prouder. I said, you guys have done an amazing job. Thank you. Thank you for all your efforts. And I said, now what we're about to do is do something that's never been done here before. I said, we're about to put ourselves on a path to getting to 60,000 tons. And people went, oh my God. Australians were going, this guy's nuts, man. We just did a record and he's still not happy. He's Canadian. No, I think he's American. One thing is certain, he's not Australian, and they think he's crazy, they said. People said, man, I don't believe it. And then we went around and we looked at the team and we said, which of you in our management team think we can actually do this? And there was a team of around 8 people. 2 of them said, it can't happen, it can't happen. We just said, look, all right, it's going to be hard enough to do this. We just got rid of those 2 people. And the other 6 said, do you think we can do this? They said, oh, we absolutely think we can do it. We think we can do that or better. So we built the team from those people. And what happened next over the next 3 years was something that nobody could have predicted. So not only did we break that record early on of 30,000 tons, but about 3 quarters later, we got to 60,000 tons. And this is 60,000 tons every month. Then we pushed the envelope a little further and we got to about 80,000. We were stuck there about 80,000 for about 9 months. We were never satisfied. We said, we can do better. We know if we can get to 100, man, we're going to triple what was done before. And then we pushed the mine through 100,000. When we sold Corora, we were doing 110,000 tons of ore a month, every month, day in, day out, day in, day out. Every month we were doing it. So when you look at when we first got to Beta Hunt, I had to stand in front of shareholders, Rob, and I'd say to them, look, this mine has never done it before, but we're about to make the production go 4 times higher. And people go, Paul, you're a good operator. We know that, but how are you going to do that? Well, we're going to change the team. We're going to change the mining method. We're going to change equipment. We're going to do these things. And people, they struggled. They're like, well, it's never been done before. Why? What makes you guys so special? And I just said, it's going to be really about focus. And we've got a plan. And we got to follow through and execute the plan. So over that period, we took a company, Corora, that was an exploration company doing 30,000 tons or 30,000 ounces a year. When we sold it, we were on a path to 200,000 ounces of gold per year. That's why we merged it with West Gold for 1.3 billion. But when you think about that story and you go, all right, they actually did that. At Klondex, I have very similar stories. And I can talk to you about it in other metrics as well, footages, other things. But now take it and apply it to America's Gold and Silver, where I am today. We don't have to stand in front of people and say, we're about to do something that's never been done. What we are saying is, people before us did this. They got to 5 million ounces. We're using 1 out of 4 shafts. We're using 1 out of 2 mills, and we're only using it 40% of the time. We'll get to 5 million ounces. Are we going to stop there? We've never been satisfied, and people have just sit on our feet and say, celebrate. Yeah, we got to 5 million ounces. Are we going to stop at 5 minutes? I highly doubt it. I think that once we get there, and we will get there, we'll start pushing the envelope and seeing what this mine has never done before. But when you get to 5 million ounces, this is the glory of it all, Rob. You go from 1 to 5 million ounces a year. That production growth, that's a $2 billion company. That coupled with Mexico, there are a few silver producers in the world. There's not many of us anymore. There's around 7 of us. So that's a very, very healthy, solid company getting very good returns, but very good shareholder returns, strong balance sheet, fully self-funded, all the capital, everything. And the other thing that's very important about Galena is that Galena ore type is very unique in the sense that we produce antimony, Rob. And I know that's a buzzword right now. I get it. I really understand. We didn't buy this or join the team and build this because of the antimony, but it is there. In fact, we're the only antimony producer in all the U.S. today. No one else is producing it. Everyone around us has got deals with Exim or the DOD or DOJ where they've got 100 million, 150 million. Every company around us, and they've done a great job. They're not producing it yet. We are producing it. And one of the agreements we just did when we renegotiated our offtake agreement with our group up in Canada with Ocean Partners and Teck, we used to get penalized for antimony, Rob. Going forward, our antimony will become a revenue stream. That is a huge change from what was being done 10 years before. You think about that. Every ton of concentrate that went up for 10 years before we were there was penalized for antimony. We've now got it that we're going to get paid for it. Now, the antimony is a silver to antimony ratio. So the more silver we produce, we go from 1 million to 5 million, the more antimony we're going to produce. And we have records to show how much antimony we produce. When we weren't there, for the 20 years before we were there, we produced over 18 million pounds, of antimony. At today's price, Rob, that's over $500 million in revenue that was gone, just evaporated, missed. You think about all that money that could have been generated from the sales of antimony, and that's at a fraction of the production rate that we're at right now. We're going to get that production up higher. So they were mining, say, 1.1 million ounces. That might translate to 4 million pounds of antimony. We're going to, as we double and triple and quadruple the silver production, the antimony production increases alongside it. So these numbers will continue to grow. So we've got antimony in our back pocket that nobody's given us credit for it yet, and that's fine. But we've also got copper. We have a copper circuit. We have a lot of copper in our mine. We're not getting paid for it. We're getting paid for our lead and our silver at the moment. We will, in the future, for our shareholders, get paid for silver, lead, copper, antimony, and gold. We haven't been paid for gold. We have about 7-gram gold in our concentrate. And I'm like, how is it possible that we're not getting paid for gold? This is ridiculous. Now, the gold, the dollar amounts they're not huge, but they're still enough to buy a brand new jumbo every year. You're like, why are you giving it away? Don't stop giving this away. We work hard enough to get it up from surface. Let's make sure we can get every revenue out of every ton that we generate. So that was a long question on America's gold and silver, but it's a big turnaround story, a very different story than where it was even 6 months ago. And now that we've got the balance sheet really in a strong, commanding position, it's about doing what this team does best, operational success. And why do you believe us? Well, why do you believe it? Because 37 years ago, I started off as a miner. Everyone on my team are very, very similar to me. Every person that I put around this team, we've stuck together for the last three companies, and they're very focused on operations like I am. We know that the best way for a company to succeed is from the mine. It's not from going to raise equity. It's not from going to raise debt. That's not the best way for us to succeed. If we're going to succeed, our mines have to be the backbone and the source of our revenue.
Which moves nicely on to the next question, where you're obviously widely recognised as an expert in the narrow vein mining, obviously particularly with narrow vein longhorn stoping. I wonder if you can just walk us through some of the technical challenges of this method, like dilution control or stope stability, and how you're historically obviously tackled them, and how are you adopting this approach to obviously unique conditions at the obviously company's Galena Complex?
Yeah, Rob, look, there's no doubt narrow vein mining is something that I know well. Again, if you think back, how do I know it? Well, that's what I did. I did it day in, day out for 10 years of my life. I grew up around it. Every day at the supper table, my father was talking about mining. My grandfather was, my uncles, everybody I knew, from Timmins, Red Lake, Sudbury. So anything I grew up as a child, as a young adult, it was all around narrow vein mining. And you're not wrong in saying long hole is the best form of narrow vein. It usually comes with issues like dilution. So the traditional forms of narrow vein mining were all done with handheld jacklegs. They were a shrinkage stope, or they were a modified shrink, or they were a cut and fill, or an underhand cut and fill. All these things that had been done for years, 100 years. You look back in some of the mines in Australia, South Africa, Timmins, all over, you look at shrinkage mining, cut and fill. They were all done with small handheld drills. And you're only mining the vein, Rob. And the reason you do that is because normally outside of the vein usually doesn't carry any revenue. So if the vein is a meter wide, you mine the vein and you leave everything else, because any other ton I move, the mill or the skipping facility doesn't know if it's a ton of ore or waste. So it costs me the same amount to bring it out of the mine. So if I'm $30 a ton, if it's a ton of ore, great. If it's a ton of waste, I'm paying the same amount to move it around, and I'm putting it through the mill. So it's in your best interest to mine the same amount of ounces with less tons. It increases your grade, and you're not mining a lot more dilution. And in long hole, historically, people have always associated long hole with these big stopes, which isn't uncommon, but it sometimes comes with the preconceived notion there's going to be a lot of dilution, and it doesn't have to be the case. What you need to do is first understand how vertically dipping your ore body is. And if your ore body is flat lying like that, Robin, if you can't see me, I'm holding my hands at about 45 degrees. You can have some real troubles with long hole because that hanging wall overexposure could be tough. The deposits that we're mining right now at Galena and the stuff we're going to be mining in Mexico is very steeply dipping. That is perfect for long hole. It doesn't matter that it's narrow. The fact that it's steeply dipping, we could come in and drill from the top and break through at that level below and look at all our holes and make sure when we blast, we don't have holes that have meandered or wandered off into the footwall 2 feet or the hanging wall 3 feet. We'll break through these holes and we'll surgically remove the rock. And I always say this, we're like dentists or surgeons where we're carving this stuff out. And when you go underground and you see a picture of a stope that's 1.1 to 1.2 meters wide, you're like, wow, how did you do that? Now, if the deposit or the geography of it starts dipping 70 degrees, well, then you might have to add additional costs by doing some hanging wall support. You might need some cable bolts and additional support that will just drive up your costs. So how steep your ore body is very important to the success you're going to have with long hole. You can always go back to a cut and fill or a shrinkage or a modified shrink. One mistake that people make is that they use a vanilla approach. They'll say, I'm coming into a mine at America's Gold and Silver, and I'm going to go to the Galena mine, and that mine will be 100% long hole. And you couldn't make a bigger mistake going into any mine in the world. Not every part of a mine has the same geology. Some areas are steeply dipping, some of them are more flat lying. You have to let the ground tell you what mining method. You can't let an engineer, the worst mistake you can do is let the CEO or an independent third party tell you, or an engineer say, you will mine it this way. You got to let the ground say, look, if I'm designed in the earth this way and an anticline or syncline, let that drive how we're going to mine it. And people often make the mistake of ignoring the ground or ignoring some people who've been there for 20 years. One of the things, every mine I've worked at, and Galena is no different. I walk in, there are miners that have been there for 15 years and an engineer who's been there for 6 months. The engineer who's been there 6 months is designing the mine, and he's ignoring the guy who's been there for 25 years. And you're like, guys, this won't work. You got to listen to him. So what that he doesn't have an engineering degree? Just listen to what he's telling you about it, because he'll help us with the dilution. He'll help us drill it properly. He'll help us blast it properly. We'll have the right fragmentation. All these things matter to reducing our costs and getting it to the mill and getting it up there faster. So long hole mining method in narrow vein, it takes a specialist. It takes a strong team that know what they're doing. I have seen too many times where people are coming in drilling blind uppers and they destroy value for shareholders. Destroy it. I have seen people, or I've come into mines as a consultant, and people just are drilling holes blind without breakthroughs. And once again, they destroy the value, or they ignore the geology. And so many people will walk into a mine and they'll just say, well, this has been this way for 40 years. I'm going to just continue it, instead of going, well, it's changing at depth. The ground has different geotechnical issues. Maybe you can't take out a 100-foot long stope anymore. Maybe it's got to be a 50-foot panel to protect the miners. Maybe things in a mine change a lot. There's a lot of volatility in the way rock moves, and you need to always be alert and on top of it. And I find too many people now, they just ignore it, or they don't pay enough attention to it. So long hole, if you can long hole in narrow vein, you will do yourself a great service, provided the geology lends itself to it.
This is your third major turnaround story, following obviously success at Klondex mine and obviously Corora resources. What key parallels do you see between obviously those past experiences and obviously the challenges you're tackling now at America's Gold and Silver? Are there any unique twists with obviously the present operation that you're obviously pushing for you to rethink your playbook that you've obviously always used?
Yeah, Rob. So look, we know for sure that each company we were with, Klondex, Corora, they were unique in their own way, but a lot of the principles that we applied were quite similar. So step one for me always is get the right team. Get the right team, get the right team. You cannot say that often enough. Even when I came into America's Gold and Silver here, unfortunately, we had the wrong team running the Galena mine. We had the right team running our mine in Mexico. The team in Mexico is a powerhouse team, and they're extremely good operators. But one of our other flagships, Galena, was being mismanaged, very poorly managed. So when you look at what we did at Klondex Corora, we put in a very, very strong operating team. And then in both cases, we adopted long hole mining method. They weren't being done at all the place. And what's very unique about Galena, Rob, our neighbors are Hecla Mining. They're doing an amazing job. These guys they've got it down pat. I got to applaud them. They're doing a great job mining at Lucky Friday, which is on a similar geologic formation. We're, I think, about six miles away from them. So they've been doing this for a long time. We're next door to them. They're on the same geology as us. They're mining 100% of their mine is long hole. And I'm mining today, well, I'm changing it. 100% of me is with Jacklake. And you have to ask yourself, well, why is it that they're doing it so well next door and I'm not doing any of it? And what will eventually happen at Galena, what you'll see is we're going to have a hybrid situation where it's not cookie cutter. It won't be 100% long hole because we have some very shallow parts of the deposit. We have very steeply dipping parts. Anywhere it's steeply dipping, you'll see us quickly adopt long hole. And we just did our first ever long hole stope out of Galena in 20 years. And that thing looks like it was carved like a surgeon removed it. It looks phenomenal. So we blasted a 7,000 ton stope. Up until now, for the last decade, everything being done with jacklegs, we're blasting 50 to 70 tons each blast, Rob. So you think about that. You go, all right, every blast I come in with a jackleg, I'm going to get 50 to 70 tons. So one guy, 50 to 70 tons, drilling and blasting 12, 14 holes, breasting it down, versus one guy drilling with a long hole and then coming in with a blasting crew and just a remote control operator, 7,000 tons. Lucky Friday are blasting 10,000 ton stopes. So we have to just look at the district we're in, start sharing best practices. And they've been very, very open-minded to work with us, which has been great because there's a lot of synergies in the district anyhow. So you may as well work together. So for us, it will never be just one mining method at Galena. We're going to have a hybrid situation where long hole will be part of it. Now, what are the next steps we did? So we changed the team, we changed the mining method, we changed the equipment. So at Klondex and Corora, we changed the equipment both. And we're changing the equipment at Galena. And one thing that's very different at Galena that we didn't need to change at the other two is a paste fill plant. We need a backfill station. So a lot of our stuff is going to come from mining with fill above our head because the fill is actually more competent than the rock in many cases. So you want that more competent stuff above the miner's head. So we don't have a batch plant right now. So it's preventing us from being as efficient as we should be. So once you bring in that rule book that we had at Klondex that made it successful, the one that we had at Corora, we're following many of the steps. They're a little different. You navigate through them differently, but bring in the right team, bring in the right equipment, bring in the right long hole mining method, and then start looking at where are our bottlenecks. And in our case, our number one bottleneck is our shaft. We're moving about 700 tons of rock, ore and waste a day at the moment we're using one of 4 shafts. We have 4, we're using 1. But we can make that shaft much more efficient. We have technical studies already from Spencer Engineering who've worked alongside us. that can demonstrate that we can go from, I'll use a per hour rate. We're doing about 42 tons per hour. Now, remember, when you're moving that rock up and down the shaft or elevator, call it what you want, it doesn't know whether it's ore or waste. It doesn't care. It just keeps going up and down. So what we're going to be able to do by the end of the year is move about 118 tons per hour. That is a tremendous, tremendous, big game changer, something that hasn't been done here in 20 years. This is why we're so confident we're going to get back to those numbers and then even surpass them. So by the end of this year, we will have that number one bottleneck we'll overcome it. That risk will be mitigated. And it's by debottlenecking that shaft. It plugs us up underground because we're drilling and blasting ore and waste, but we got nowhere to put it. So we have to get it out of the mine. So the playbook, quite simple. Team, equipment, mining method, backfill, and then debottlenecking. And we're on our way. And then look, making sure that all of us are very aligned with our shareholders. You can't ever underestimate how important that is. And for me, again, I'm repeating myself, 37 years in mining. I don't come from a very wealthy family. Any of my net worth, mine and my wife's, has been built up over year after year after year. The biggest position we've ever invested in our lives is in this. After we sold Corora, we've been able to deploy a big amount of our net worth into this, and it's the lowest risk I've ever put my own net worth in my life. And again, I've said this a couple times, Rob, I have a wife and 7 kids. I'm not about to put anything at risk. It's the safest place. People have said, man, you bet pretty big on this one. You look on SEDI filings, and I'm probably about the 4th largest shareholder, Eric Sprott, a couple other companies. And then you can see my SEDI filings are probably north of 28 to 30 million shares. That's a big position for a person like me to be in. And I wrote a big check, and I'm not alone. Other members of my team, all the people that were with me at Klondex, Corora, have wrote big checks alongside me, alongside our shareholders.
When you're driving operational improvements, especially obviously in turnaround situations, which obviously been a few in, how do you decide which changes to obviously prioritize? You've talked about obviously metrics like feet per man shift. Can you explain how you use this, other KPIs to track obviously and boost efficiency? I wonder if you can just give us an example of a game-changing improvement you've made and its obviously impact from your changes.
Okay, actually, I got to ask you a question, Rob. I guess I'm getting a question. What are we at 35 minutes? 57 minutes. Do you think somebody's still listening at this point? Because
I'm sure they are. I'm sure so everyone is listening and tuned in.
If somebody's listening, send me an email and I owe you a beer. So whoever's listening here, say, I heard you say it, Paul Heut. Get my email. I owe you a beer. So when I see this person, I'm going to be quite happy. And I'm happy to talk about it. I enjoy talking about it. And I think one of the things people always underestimate is efficiencies in a mine. And given that I was a miner and I know that one person can drill and blast on the same face multiple times in one day, I know what it's like to do the work with a jackknife. I have a tremendous advantage. And then I can inspire and motivate my men and women very differently. I always reference it to, let's say you went out, Rob, tomorrow and you went and bought a new car, or no matter where it was, and you bought that car and you were driving down the road after just purchasing it, and we'll use the metric of either miles per hour or kilometers per hour. You're driving your new car and it's doing about 30 miles per hour or 45 kilometers per hour. Are you satisfied with that new car? You're like, Jesus, I just bought a new car. This isn't a horse and buggy here. Why is this car doing 35 miles an hour? The freeway speed limit is 65. The car can't do any more than that. It's the same thing in a mine. So in a mine, those metrics, and I'll use feet per man shift. It's referencing it back to the car. Would you be satisfied at 35 miles per hour? You'd be like, no way, I'm not happy with that. I'm going to do something about this car. There's something wrong. At our mine, one of the first things I do everywhere I go, anywhere in the world, I get asked to consult for something. I ask people, I'll go hire a junior engineer. I'll say, do a time study for me. just go underground and just get a stopwatch or 2 stopwatches or 3 of them and start timing our truck cycle times or our tramming time underground or an amount of time it takes us to drill and blast around in a mine. We have a tremendous advantage when we're mining on surface, Rob, because on surface, we are so efficient. We're so good at what we do in mining because you can go to a mining company and say, well, what's your truck cycle time? They'll say, it's 42 minutes, 13 seconds. You'll say, what's your shovel time? My shovel, I never take more than 4 shovels, and I'm about 42 seconds to fill a truck. And you're like, holy cow. In an underground mine, we can't tell you those metrics. And it's because we don't have satellites above our head. So what we have to do, we still need them. To be efficient, we need to know what they are. Too many times I go into a mine, and I'll pick on ourselves here. America's Gold and Silver, I walked into it at the beginning and I said, what is our average feet per man shift? Going back to miles per hour. And after about a month, we just said, we don't know what it is. We're not tracking it. I said, how is that possible? How could you not know what we're doing? I said, how do you run a mine without knowing how efficient you are? How do you know how many people should be doing this? So what we determined after a month of doing time studies, we were mining at a productivity rate about 1.1 to 1.2 feet per man shift. Now bring it back to the car here. That's less than 30 miles per hour, actually. The average in the United States, just use the US, is about 2.3 to 2.6 feet per man shift. So one person, that means you, Rob, or me, Paul, underground, I'm advancing through the rock about 2.6 feet per man shift. At the beginning, America's Gold and Silver is sitting at about 1.1. We're half of the rest of everybody else here. And you're like, what is going on? And the fact that we didn't know it, that's a big problem on its own. You can't fix what you don't know. And there's power in numbers. There's tremendous power in numbers. So first we have to go, all right, what are our metrics on feet per man shift, tons per man shift? And let's stick to that one. We went back to the miners and we said, look, at the moment, we compared ourselves with 30 other mines in the US, and we were ranked about 28, 29, or 30, depending on of the worst mines. And I said to our men and women, I said, look, in less than a year, we're going to be in the top 5. We aren't going to sit here and be happy. But as we do that, I said, you, as a miner working at this mine, will be able to make more money. And we incentivize them differently. We encourage and incentivize them through a bonus system. That's safety first more than anything. We will not jeopardize safety under any way, shape, or form. But we'll put in a safety program and a bonus system alongside them. And we just did one. We have put one in. It's been in place for about 8 weeks now. And I want to add one thing. At Corora and Klondex, we always, any period you would have come in and asked me, Paul, what's your feet per man, what's your tons per man, I would have given it to you instantly. I'd have known it at the top of my head. At Klondex, we were about 4.7 feet per man, almost 50% higher than the rest of the US. Our miners made about 20 to 30% more per year than any of the other miners. But our costs were much lower than everybody's because we were getting much more footage out of one person than anyone else in the US. Last pay period at Galena, we had an earth-shattering group that made $111 an hour bonus, but they crushed 6.5 feet per man shift. 6 months ago, we were doing 1.1 to 1.2. I had 4 miners underground. Now, they did it with multiple headings, but do you have any idea how much cheaper that is for me and my shareholders? Now, they made better money, the miner did, but I need 50% less people to do the same amount or more work. I'm getting more work done with 50% less people. And that's what productivity rates and efficiencies mean. And when you don't know them, it's a real problem. Open pits, we know them like that because we always got some tracking system on a truck. We got it on everything. There's no hiding in an open pit. The guy who's the superintendent or the foreman is on the edge of the pit in a truck watching everybody. In a mine, it's not as efficient, and we've got to manage that. And we have to motivate them because if you don't motivate the people, they'll just go to the station. They'll go like, well, I'll move 100 trucks and then I'm just going to stop. You're like, well, there's still 3 hours left. Well, you don't pay me to do any more anyhow. Why would I do more than 100, Mr. Heut? You know, if I do 100, it's very consistent. I get paid a certain amount of dollars and you're not going to pay me if I did 120 or 140. So what we do now is we say, look, it's your choice now. We want to know, and we tell people. We were averaging about 108 cars. We're averaging about 170 cars now. But we're paying people to say, and we're putting it out on boards. We're saying, look, these we're doing before 6 months ago, 108 cars per shift. Now we're seeing a steady trend of going up. And it's so important to understand every mine you go into, you should know your productivity rates, and you should, if you don't give up, ask for them. And if the chief engineer or the general manager doesn't know, get them help. Doesn't mean you throw them you say, oh, throw them out, they're not good. That's not true. Get them some help and get them and explain to them, why does it matter? Like, I have that ability as a miner, as a operator, as a CEO, to sit with the senior staff and walk through this with them and be very passionate about it and say, look, do you want your guys to make $60 an hour or $100 an hour? Well, they're going to say, well, most of them will want to make $100 an hour. Well, let's open the door for them. Let's make sure we open that door and show them the path so that they can make that, so that our costs can come down. So I get very passionate and excited when I start talking about productivity rates, because typically every mine I've been part of, our team will be some of the best you're going to find in the world.
Yeah. I suppose moving on from that, obviously, as you mentioned, rewarding teams is obviously crucial in tough environments. Can you share some other maybe examples of how you recognise and reward some of your crews for standout work? Obviously, you've mentioned the bonuses, but I wonder if there was anything else. And how do you mix financial rewards with other forms of recognition to keep your teams motivated and loyal?
Yeah, so for us, I think what you find in mining, bonus is very important for the guy drilling and blasting at the face. It might have a different meaning for that geologist or surveyor or chief engineer. In that case, we typically align them with, we like to give salaried people shares of the company, but we also offer succession planning. I think you could never underestimate how important succession planning is on a person. You get an engineer that's been doing it for 7 years, and then you offer to send them to some kind of training that's 6 to 8 weeks to allow them to grow. They become better engineers. It's a great investment. Usually it's $20,000 to $30,000 investment, but it really helps them become a better engineer, operator, helps them better understand his role or her role. So we do a lot of early on mentoring, succession planning, and it's something that I build right into the budget. I say to people, look, who's next month, who's in training, who's going to be going to attend this, and training our people, our foremen, our superintendents, our chief engineers, our GMs, putting in the money behind them. And that is very important. It's important to them as well as they grow their career, right? Because people normally want to get better and better in their career, Rob, and bonus will do a part, but it won't do it all. You need to make sure you have a strong team, an influential team that they can learn from as well. You can't, if the top person is weaker than 3 layers below it, well, you need to make a change. And unfortunately, a lot of teams are like that. And instead of making a change, they don't like confrontation, so they push the change over to another bucket. They're like, well, it never went away. Now you gave it to that department. Now the safety department's all messed up for the next 3 or 4 years. Cut the umbilical cord and just make a change, make your team stronger. So there's a lot of ways to motivate people that I've found. You know, it might sound corny, but even a simple discussion, a phone call, every accident that happens at the mine, everyone, if there's an incident at the mine, I'm the CEO. I will pick up the phone and I will call that employee the next day and I will say, hello, Rob, my name is Paul Heut. I was just calling to check up on you. I just wanted to make sure, first and foremost, you're okay. And then I'd like to understand, is there anything we could have done as a company to prevent that injury from happening or the accident? Is there anything you could tell me that would help prevent any of your coworkers from going through the same situation? I do that for every incident. And I'm the CEO of the company. I'm not sure how many other CEOs do it. I'm sure there are some. But when I first came into this company, people were like, you're going to call Everyone? I said, everyone. I said, I want to know an incident report within 24 hours. I want the cell phone number of that male or female, and I would like to call them just to check up on them and say, we care. And that fosters a very, very different company.
And I suppose, again, moving on from what you've just saying, obviously mentorship is obviously central to your leadership. And obviously you've given enough examples during this podcast. How do you approach, obviously, mentoring miners at your operations? And what, I suppose, specific initiatives have you rolled out to build a culture of safety and efficiency? And I'm wondering if you can obviously share some examples that obviously meant your mentorship has provided obviously real differences in performance and safety.
Yeah, so you're right. I've given quite a few examples here. Given that I have a very different background than most CEOs, let's just talk about the CEO who was here before me. Honestly, he's a great person. I like him a lot, but he's not a mining guy. So if he's going to go underground and speak to the miners, it'll be just about how's the weather today, how's your family doing, and that's also important to me. But I can actually also take the conversation a step further and sit down with him and say, how's the drilling going today? How's the ground going today? What is going on today? What do we do for an active safety today? I was involved in a pretty serious injury in my career, and I won't get into details in it, but it was a pretty serious injury. That injury allowed me to really, really make sure that any part of a mine I'm involved with, anything I do in mining, I will make sure that that miner goes home to his family more than anything in the world, because production will always follow through. In fact, we have records and we have numbers that show our most productive months are always our safest months. The ones where we have more injuries are the least productive. So I get frustrated to hear people go, well, you got to take this shortcut, you got to do this. It's not true. You just don't have to do it. I get frustrated when I hear people say mining is so dangerous. It's not true. Mining is hazardous. Mitigate the hazards. Put in the SOPs and make sure you follow them. Don't ignore them, and protect your people. So back to my own experiences, I am very, very much engaged. I am underground with them. Like, I'm at the mine every week, sometimes twice a week. That is very uncommon, Rob. When I became CEO of Corora, I moved my family from US to Australia so I could be close to the mine. In the first 6 months, I spent 89 days underground. The CEO before me at America's Gold and Silver spent five in 5 years. So you're like, man, they're not used to seeing the CEO. When I became CEO of Klondex, I was living in Canada. I moved my family, wife and children, from Canada to Nevada because the mines were all in Nevada. I believe that in order to get through to the miners and help motivate them and get the best ones and train them, my God, these people need training as well. And we need to be training some of these younger people. Put in a school stope, develop a school stope, and just let us train the people the way we want. Sometimes it's better off to get 10 people right out of high school and that we could train them over a 3-month period instead of getting some people that have 3-4 years experience and have all these bad experiences that you're going, oh my God, don't, what are you doing? Don't use explosives that way. Oh my God, don't do that. Oh, we did it at the last mine. It's fine. I'm like, it's not fine. It's not fine at all. So for us, we always have very good training programs. Safety, we don't mess with it. It's paramount. I will rather fire somebody, and I don't say this often. I don't believe in threatening people, but I'd rather terminate somebody and fire them to protect them and make sure they go home, rather than walk away and say someone's doing something unsafe and risk that person could get hurt. So I want them to go home more than anything in my life. So I don't want them to experience some of the challenges I had in my career. So for us, a big safety program is important. A training program is equally important. Me spending a lot of time underground speaking to them. I can't tell you the value. Even I'll be selfish and say the value it gives to me. I love I love being in a mine. I enjoy it the most. I enjoy marketing. I enjoy all parts of my job. The place I'm the happiest is always when you throw a hard hat on me and put a lamp on my head and go down and speak to miners, because I feel at home. I'm like, I enjoy it a lot. And I enjoy mentoring people. And at this point in my career, after 37 years, I believe that my responsibility is to share some of my experiences with our people and help them have a great career. Most of them, I was in a room the other day, Rob. I got to tell a quick story. I was in a room the other day and there was 26 miners around the table. And I looked around the table and I thought, man, am I the only guy with gray hair here? I said, how many people in this room have more than 5 years experience? 5 miners raised their hand. And I thought, okay. And I said, let me ask a different question. How many miners in this room have less than 2 years of mining experience? 21 people raised their hand and I went, whoa, 21 on a night shift. And I thought, wow, 21 people out of 26 have less than 2 years mining experience. So then I went back to our GM and our people running the mine and said, how is it possible that we've got 26 people going on in a night shift? 21 of them got less than 2 years. What are we doing? Oh, well, because of past practices, the people with the most experience don't want to work night shift. They want to work steady days. So we put all the young people on night shift. I said, but that's where all our accidents are happening. I said, we need to be smart about this. Let's start explaining to people. We need to mentor these people. We don't want them getting hurt. But when there's 20 people trying very hard, by the way, working very hard, but not knowing some of the easiest safety practices, accidents happen. And we got to be better leaders to prevent that from happening. So this was my first 2 weeks that I became CEO, and I was baffled. I was like, whoa, this has to stop now.
Looking 5 to 10 years ahead, what do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities for mining in general? And whether it's technology adoption, sustainability pressures, jurisdictional hurdles, how is America's Gold and Silver position itself to stay ahead of obviously these trends?
Yeah, so look, that's a pretty loaded question, Rob.
Yeah.
It's a pretty powerful one. So I'm going to bite it in smaller chunks here. So you think about mining as a whole, and I think I touched on this. Unless we find a way as leaders to attract younger people and motivate them and get them right out of high school, and maybe they go into colleges. There's not enough people going into colleges anymore, into mining programs, into geology programs, into surveying. We really need to get better. All the big guys, the small guys, all of us together collaboratively, we've got to start using everything we can to start promoting how great mining truly is and what kind of great career you can have along the way. Anything can happen in mining, and you don't have to have a perfectly written script. You could create your own script. So when I think about mining, I think metal prices are going to be very strong over the next 10 years. I think we're on to a very powerful bull market in gold, silver, copper, antimony, other metals. I think mining is strong. Permitting is it is what it is. You're not just going to flip a switch and change permitting. So do your homework. Some jurisdictions, like you look at permitting in the US, permitting in Canada, permitting in Australia, it's a pretty well written script, and you follow your procedures and get it done. There are other places in the world that they might be easier, but you could have a risk of potentially losing that permit because the jurisdiction might not be as safe. So do your homework on making sure that the property you're investing in, somebody, either the management's done the DD on understanding is it a safe jurisdiction, or you know it yourself, because permitting, it could stall a project pretty quick in its tracks, or external stakeholders. You could find yourself finding one of the best drill intercepts you've ever got, but going, man, I can't get a mine into there for 20 years. And people, they get tired of it. People go, well, look, I was a great discovery hole, but that discovery hole happened 10 years ago. And they've had some follow-up holes. They put in a mineral resource inventory, but there's still no mine. So permitting is a process that we all need to understand. There's good money to be made in stocks in the permitting cycle. You have to, again, do your homework. But I think one of our biggest challenges as a whole, as an industry, isn't the metal prices. It's us attracting the right talent to make sure that we have good people here. Otherwise, you're going to see a lot more older people like me on boards, and that's not what the board needs. In fact, I was just speaking on a board this morning saying it would be great to have much younger people on this board because there's a lot of talent, but we need to attract more people.
Yeah. And I obviously I work in the recruitment space, and I'm a headhunter, and I'm always putting out on LinkedIn, and when I speak to other CEOs, when I'm doing these podcasts, or even just in general, if I'm having a chat with them, or even assisting with recruitment, or they're looking for a new position, it always does. When a lot of conversations I have always does come down to the lack of talent in our industry, and sometimes I do get people opposing that and saying, no, we have got enough talent in our industry. But all right, there may be certain areas where there is more talent than others. But I think overall, our industry globally does have a supply shortage of staff. Now, I suppose my question to you is, how can we attract, what can the mining industry do, whether that's institutions or whether it's individuals? What can we, and obviously there's people listening to this, most of the people that listen to this are people from the mining industry. What can our industry do, whether it's individuals or institutions, what can we do better to try and attract more people into our industry, but also not attract people into our industry, but also once they're in the industry, keep them in the industry as well, so they don't leave as well. Because that would be another problem. If we do track these people into the industry, we don't want them leaving after a period of time, because then that defeats some of that objective. So is there any thoughts that you've had about how we can attract people from outside of mining into mining? And there's certain obvious ways, but is there any thoughts that you've thought how people can come into our industry, and more people come into our industry?
I think it's all about education. I think we need to be extremely transparent. We live in a world that is so full of information. There's almost information overload. No matter what you do, you grab a cell phone, there's just so much coming at you. There's so much information now. We as an industry need to get ahead of that and take advantage of it. Use social media in a sense where instead of it being always negative, where there's an issue that occurred, a tails dam failure here, there's a tails dam failure here. Talk about the great things that we're doing. Talk about all of the great things that mining is necessary for. Without mining, boy, we're not all, not everybody becomes a vegetarian. We need mining for so much of everything we do. The computer, like I don't need to list it. Anything we do today requires mining. I don't find, there are some people, there are some groups that are much better than others, some countries that are better than others. But even when at a young age, I remember different industries, the wood industry always coming in high school. They'd come in 3 times a year and say, hey, look, if you're not a good hockey player in Timmins, you could come in the wood industry. And they would go right into our high schools and start talking. I don't see us doing that. We've got to be, the most important thing in my opinion now with this generation is be very transparent, because they'll research it and they'll figure something out on YouTube. They'll find something. They'll go, well, you said this, but look, this says this. You're like, holy moly. So be very transparent. But I think, I feel like we don't do a good enough job of making sure we're out there. This is a big campaign that I've asked our team at AGS to do differently. I said, what are we going to do different? I said, how are we going to attract the younger people here? Well, again, when I said about those 21 miners being 2 years or less, that fascinated me. There was 2 things that came to my mind that I was. One was concerned first that there was too many younger people with less experience. But the one thing that shocked me was well, how did we get all these young people here? And I said, in Nevada, I could not do this. I ran Klondex for 7 years for Nevada. Then I was running a mine for Newmont for 7 years. I could not get all these young people. How are they getting them here in Idaho? I said, what are they doing so differently? And in Idaho specifically, it's really a lot of people follow a generational thing, but people like Idaho a lot because it's beautiful. Like, what's not to like about Idaho? We were not getting the same kind of love or reception in Nevada. I couldn't get 21 people that age because there wasn't. They're just. I don't know if they weren't available. We weren't attracting them. So that fascinated me that we had a lot here. So it's not an easy cookie cutter answer, Rob. It is something though. I think it's something where you need to just deploy a bit of money and say, we need to stop sticking our heads in the sand and doing nothing. We need to, in collaboration, go with AEMA, a Nevada Mining Association. Go with companies around us and start talking together. And what are we going to do? Because look, there's no doubt to me it's a problem. I've watched what's happened. I've been mining 37 years. And I remember decade after decade, how, as you point out, retaining people, the downturns, people leave and they don't ever come back. So it's very important that we're, I believe, very transparent, but we're putting some effort, real effort behind it, and make it a part of HR. I don't have the perfect answer, but I know this. I know that I've challenged my own people and I said, look, come up with the plan. I'm going to endorse something. We'll put in money in the budget, but we're going to make it something meaningful. We'll go to the schools. Let's see how that impacts us. Let's get out there and start talking about all the great things we do instead of every time you grab your phone, it's a tragedy. You can pick any industry. It could be that way. So anyhow, it's tough. That one's a tough one for me to answer, but I think I can answer it the best way I did there.
Yeah. Lastly, most of our audience are people within the mining industry predominantly. I just wonder if you can give any advice to any of our audience. Obviously, you're an expert in underground mining, and I'd imagine a lot of these people are mixed underground and open pit mining. I just wonder if there's any advice that you can give. And again, these people could be geologists, mine engineers, maintenance, processing, surveying, health and safety. I just wonder if there's any general words that you could give people in our industry, and again, people global that listen to this, through obviously your experience and what you've just explained, and obviously in a lot of detail, obviously your career. I just wonder if there's any words of advice that you could give people within our mining industry.
Yeah, so first I would like to say to all of those people that are listening, that are in the mining, thank you for your service, because it is truly a service. You do get paid for what you do, but mining takes a different type of person and a different breed of people, and miners all over, whether it doesn't matter what you're in, geology, surveying, environmental, are fantastic people all over the world. And I'll share with you something that I shared and I lived through in my own life. And I share this advice with a minimum of 10 to 15 people each year and encourage people to follow through with this. I share the real life story about myself, Paul Heut, and my father, Leo Heut. At the age of 21 years old, I ran into somebody. I was working up in Yellowknife, and there was a very young mine superintendent. He was about 30 years old. And I asked that mine superintendent, I said, wow, I said, Greg, I said, how did you become a mine captain? You're only like 29 years old. How did you do that? And he said, you know what, Paul? He said, our generation's a little different than the ones before. I said, I made sure that the people I work for knew that I wanted to be promoted. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I went to my boss and said, look, in my life, I would like to get promoted. I'd like to do this. And from that point, once I told them, they started looking at opportunities to grow me. And I thought, okay, let me put that in the back of my mind. And then I remember flying back to Timmins from Yellowknife, and I went to my father and I said, Dad, you've been mining for 30 years. Why aren't you a GM or a VP yet? And he said, oh, that's easy. They never asked. And I said, what do you mean, Dad? He said, They never asked. They should have recognized me. I was better than the GM. I was way better, and they never asked. And then it didn't take me but a couple months later, and I put it all together, and I thought, wow, think about the just the mining that I've been exposed to and the generational differences. I have a father who I admire and looked up to my whole life, who never got promoted because he waited his whole life for somebody to come up and promote him. And as a result, my father died at 72, 73 years old, and he was still drilling till the day he retired. Now he's held some really good roles, but he never became a GM, a VP, or a CEO like he could have. Then you have the other spectrum. You got what I did. I said, well, you know what? I don't want to do the same thing as my dad. I want to do something different. So I listened to that other guy. Every role I went into in my future, I went to my immediate supervisor or the mine general manager or even the CEO, and I'd say, you know, at some point in time, I would really like to be a CEO. If there's anything you could do or any programs that are out there, I'd be very open-minded to hear them, or I'd be welcome. And just that one simple thing of telling the people you work for, because in today's world, in the mining industry, things are moving so fast. Oftentimes, your immediate supervisor doesn't often think about, if he has 15 people working for him, he doesn't normally think, well, Paul wants to become a shift boss one day, wants to become a superintendent, wants to become, and it's not because they're overlooking you. It's just because they're so busy and everything. And I say this to my people. I tell all the people who work for me, if there's a point in your career you want to get promoted, come tell me, because I don't have a crystal ball. I can't read your mind. Come and tell me. Let me know. And I will do everything I can to help get you that pathway. Because if I was able to do it, you can do it. Don't ever underestimate. If I could become a CEO, then 100% chance you could do it. You got to have the willingness and you want to do it. But don't be afraid to ask. Go tell somebody who you work for. Say, hey, at some point in time, I don't always want to be a driller. I'd like to maybe be a foreman one day. How do I get there? And that is a real life experience that I share, Rob, with people time and time again. And just the impact it's had on my own career and the one it had on my father, who never asked. He refused. His pride got in the way. He said, I would never ask, because I told my dad, well, I'm going to ask. Oh, they should just recognize you and they should promote you. They get a little too busy, and they're not being bad. It's just the more you get in front of people and tell them that you are motivated and want to learn and want to be promoted, they usually tend to want to help you. 9 out of 10 times that person's going to say, I want to mentor that guy or her. I really want to help her grow to the next layer. And I can tell you, over the years, I've got about 10 people that I watch very closely in my career. 2 of them that are C-suite executives that I helped train over the last 15 years that I'm very proud of.
Yeah. And I suppose it's so simple and obvious as you say it, but not many people do that.
No,
and it's so invaluable what you just said. So it is and it's good closing on that, because it is a lesson and so simple that people can just use, and hopefully by using that and just thinking about that to obviously elevate their career over time. So
yeah, they could change their careers forever. That simple thing. And you're right, Rob, it's simple, but so many people don't do it. You would be surprised. Like, even I wouldn't have done it. I remember going and asking him, how did you become a superintendent so young? How did you do that? And he's like, I just went and asked. And I thought, okay, that's an interesting thing. So if anybody's listened for an hour and 30 minutes, that's about the best advice they can get from Paul Heut. And I truly, sincerely wish them the best in their career. And you're in a great, great industry. There are a lot of amazing people in our mining industry.
Paul, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much for your time. Obviously sharing your life stories, and it has been unique, the career path that you've taken. Like you said at the beginning, it's not necessarily for everyone, but your path has certainly taken you probably higher than what you probably would have done if you did take another path. And sharing your life experience, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. And obviously telling us about America's Gold and Silver and what you're planning to do. If our audience wants to reach out to you, if they want to hear some more stories, and obviously follow the company, how can they go about doing that, and what social media platform channels are you on?
Yeah, so the best way to get a hold of us is through Maxim. Go to our website. We have contacts there, and Maxim will always get a hold of us. There's an info line there, and Maxim or Oliver Turner will, and Maxim's last name is escaping me, but it doesn't matter.
No, we'll include all those in the show notes.
Yeah,
anyway.
show it, Rob.
Yeah. And are you on any social media platforms? Do you put things on YouTube? Do you put things on X? Or is that...
I believe so. Again, that's a Maxim question. You might have to answer this because I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah. You're just behind the camera, probably. Someone's filming you. He puts it all out there. So we'll include all those in the show notes anyway, for easy access. So really appreciate your time. Perhaps you want to come on the podcast again. Maybe we could talk about something else that you've learned during your career that can obviously be beneficial to our audience.
All right, Rob.
Yeah.
Take care.
Great speaking. We'll speak soon.
All right, take care.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Obviously, an action-packed episode. Obviously, Paul's spoken a lot. You can see he's passionate behind what he does. And the thing is, him showing what he's done during his career, and obviously he's passionate as where it's actually got him to where he is today. So this is certainly an episode that should be shared amongst our mining community and everyone that you know in our industry, because there's a lot of golden nuggets that Paul's obviously spoken about, and especially right at the very end. So thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed that episode. As always, appreciate your continued support. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.